Hi, welcome back to my channel. I am now going to be doing my June reads, and I just finished recording my May reads, and I need to edit that and publish that, and then I will get this one done, and then by the time I get this one ready to go, July should be just about over, and then I can set up my July reads video. For the month of June, which was a good month for me, I don't expect to have months like this all the time, but for June I was able to read 51 books, and let's see, 51 books came up to 17,323 pages, and when I average that out, it comes out to 577 pages a day. And then this averaged out to about 339 pages a book, and that's pretty much my yearly average, because I think my entire yearly average is 338 pages a book. So the length of the books, that is consistent. And I'm just going to jump right into it because it'll probably be a long video. The very first book I read was The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This was released on June 1st, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I read this book back in May, but it wasn't released until July 2nd, and I gave it 5 stars. And this is only my second book by Riley Sager, but he's definitely going to be one of my favorites. The next book I read was The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell, and this won't be out until November 5th, but I just couldn't wait because I love her books, so I read it as soon as I got it, and I gave it 5 stars. The next book I read was a print arc, actually, and this is A Beautiful Corpse by Christy Doherty, which came out on March the 12th, so yes, I had it for a little bit before I was able to take the time to read it. And A Beautiful Corpse is the second book in the Harper McLean series. I read the first one, which I believe was In Echo Killing. I then read the 4th book in the Dr. Evelyn Talbot series, and that is Blind Spot by Brenda Novak. That was a really good book. I read all of the books and the novella that preceded the book. And I want to say The House, but I'm just drawing a blank, but it's Dr. Evelyn Hanover House. I'm sorry, I had to think about that for a second. This book won't be out until August 27th, but she's another author that I have to read as soon as I get the book, so I read that a few months before the release date, and I gave that one 5 stars. I then read another book a couple months earlier than released, and that was Someone We Know by Shari Lapena. So I believe it'll be out right after this video is released, because the due date for that book, the release date for that book, is July 30th. And I love that Shari Lapena book, and I gave it 5 stars. I then read the second book in the Sometimes in Love series by Melanie Johnson. That book is Smitten by the Brit. Now this book was released on May 28th, and I gave it 4 stars. I then read California Girls by Susan Mallory, and this came out February 26th, and I was able to give it 4 stars. The next book I read was The Favorite Daughter by Kara Ruda, and this was released on May 21st. It was a really good read, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I read another book, or the third book in the Sometimes in Love series by Melanie Johnson, and that one was called Once Upon a Bad Boy. I enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. I'm slowly reading the In Death series by J.D. Robb, so the book that I read in June was Conspiracy in Death. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, and it came out on April 1st, actually in 1999. Now, I didn't write this author's name down. Love on Lexington Avenue is Lauren Lane. I have to write this in my notes. And that book came out June 9th, and it's the second book in the Central Park Pact, and I gave it 4 stars. I then read The Book Supremacy by Kate Carlisle, which is the 13th book in the Bibliophile series. This came out June the 4th, and I gave it 4 stars. And I love this book so much that I already read the first 3 in this series. So the review title was the 13th book, but I went to my library and I got the first 3 and I read those. And as soon as time permits, I will continue on in the series, at least until I catch up, and then maybe by the time I catch up, book number 14 will be out. Then I read 2 books in the Lark Lane series. The first one was The Sharp Girls of Lark Lane, which was by Pam House, and it came out back in December, but I just got to it and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Nurses of Lark Lane, which was the 3rd book in that series, and that one came out in June the 13th, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Now, I just started the Hannah Swenson series by Joanne Fluke, so this is only the 2nd book in that series, which is Strawberry Shortcake Murder. This came out in 2011, and I gave it 4 stars, and I will be reading the entire series. I then read the first book in a new series by J.G. Roberts, and that is Little Girl Missing, and that is the Detective Rachel Hart, as I mentioned, book 1. This came out June 14th, and I gave it 4 stars. I then read The Starter Wife by Nina Lauren, and The Starter Wife came out June the 11th, and I was able to give this one 3.5 stars. The next book I read was Summer at Firefly Beach by Jenny Hale. This book was released on June the 17th, and I was able to give this one 5 stars. I then read Strangers She Knows by Christina Dodd, which is the 3rd book in the Cape Charade series. Now, this book won't be released until September 17th, but because I read the 1st and the 2nd book, plus there were several novellas, it's like I've read the 5th book. When this book came out, there was no way I could wait till September to read it. It was fantastic. The series is over now, and I gave it 5 stars, and I'm definitely going to miss this series. Then I read a heartbreaking book, the most emotional book I've ever read, and that was 99 Days with You by Catherine Miller. And I gave this one 5 stars, and it came out June 19th. Now, I am coming to the end of the Lucy Stone series because this is book number 17, which is English Tea Murder. And it's, like I said, the Lucy Stone series, and this is by Leslie Meyer. This came out in 2012, and I gave it 3 stars. I'm pretty sure yes, I did. I read Easter Bunny Murder, which is book number 18, just last week. And then I read A Promise for the Twins by Melissa Sennett. Now, this is the Wyoming Multiple series, and I didn't write down what number that was. This was released on June 1st, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was The Mother's Mistake by Ruth Held, and this came out June the 11th, and I gave it 4 stars. I then read 2 books in the Gilded Age Girls series by Maya Rodell. The first one was Duchess by Design, and that came out back in October, so I had to get that book from my library because of the review title that I'll tell you about in just one moment. But in any event, Duchess by Design by Maya Rodell came out October the 23rd, and I gave it 4 stars. And then I read the 2nd book in that series, and that is Some Like It Scandalous. And this was a current release, a June 18th release, which again is the Gilded Age Girls series, and I gave that one 4.5 stars. It is the 2nd book in the series, and I'm not sure if it's going to continue or not. Then I read Wherever She Goes by Kelly Armstrong, and this came out I'm sorry, I'll try to get the whole book in the shot. This came out, if I back it up, I can get the whole book, yes. Wherever She Goes came out June 25th. It was a really good read, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read the 7th book in the Jenny Starling series, and that was The Country Inn Mystery by Faith Martin. I love this series. There are currently no new books in this series, but I certainly hope she continues. This was quite enjoyable, and I gave it 5 stars. I then read Till There Was You by Marie Force, which is the 4th book in the Butler, Vermont series, and I had not had time to read the previous books. This came out June 18th, and I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book I read was Her Daughter's Mother by Daniela Petrova, and this came out June 18th, and I gave this one 5 stars. I then read 2 books in the Bridgeport Social Club series. A month or so ago, I read the first book in the series, but the 2 that I read in June, the first one was All In by Shelley Shepard Gray, and that I gave 4 stars, and it came out in February. And then I read immediately after that Hold On Tight by Shelley Shepard Gray, for the 3rd book in the Bridgeport Social Club series, and that book came out in June, which got 4 stars from me. I then read A Family of Strangers by Emily Richards, and this came out June 25th, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read the first book in a new series by Emily March, and that is called Jackson. The series is The Eternity Springs McBrides of Texas, and it's number 1, as I mentioned. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is a jump off of the Eternity Springs series, which I think had 16 titles, but I didn't read any of those. This came out June 25th, and I was able to give this one 4 stars. I then read The Highland Earl by Amy Jarecki, and The Highland Earl is Lords of the Highland series, book number 6. This came out June the 19th, and I loved it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I next read The Tuscan Secret by Angela Petch, and this came out June 24th, and I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars. If I'm not mistaken, there is a second book in this series that's either already out or about to come out. Now, as I already mentioned, I started the Joanna Fluke series, so in June I was able to read 2 of these. So the second one I read in the month of June was Blueberry Muffin Murder, and this is the 3rd book in the Hannah Swenson series, and I believe there's 25, so it'll take several months before I read any more. This came out in 2011, and I gave it 4 stars. I next read Summer at the Little French Cafe by Karen Clark, which came out June 24th. It was quite enjoyable, and I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book I read was another Patricia Johns series, but it was a contemporary romance, not an Amish series, and it was called The Lawman's Baby. Now, The Lawman's Baby is Home to Eagle's Rest, number 3, and I hadn't read the previous titles, but I did want to read it because I do like Patricia Johns. This came out July 2nd, and I gave it 5 stars. The next book I read was The Rumor by Leslie Carr. This came out June 18th, and I enjoyed it because I gave it 5 stars. Then I read The Dream House by Jess Rider, and this came out June 18th, and I loved it, and I gave it 4 stars. I was eager to grab this because last year I read The Ex-Wife by Jess Rider, so I knew I would enjoy this book. The next book I read was Fake Like Me, and I will back up so you can see the whole thing, and it's by Barbara Borland. Fake Like Me came out June 18th. It was okay. It wasn't a favorite, so I've hidden iPad. I was only able to give it 3 stars. The next book I read was Last House Guest by Megan Miranda, and The Last House Guest came out on June 11th, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read a couple of Sophie Barnes series. The first one was No Ordinary Duke, which came out last year back in August, and I gave it 4 stars, and it's the Crawfords series #1. And then I read More Than a Road by Sophie Barnes, and this came out June 11th, which I gave 4 stars, and it is the Crawfords #2. I read another historical romance, which is How to Cross a Marquess by Jane Ashford. This book won't be out until August 27th, and I do believe this is a re-release. And this is The Way to a Lord's Heart #3, and I believe I read the first 2. I'm 99% positive I read the first 2. As I mentioned, this comes out August 27th, and I gave it 4 stars. I then read The Liar's House by Kyle Kovac, and The Liar's House came out on June the 28th, and I gave it 4 stars. And by the way, The Liar's House was the Detective Gina Hart series, and it was the 3rd book in that series. And if I'm not mistaken, I read the first 2. And I'm almost at the end, because the next one was Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Happiness by Sandra Hill. And this came out June 25th, and I gave it 4 stars. And then the last book that I read in June was Project Duchess by Sabrina Jeffries, another historical romance, and this came out June 25th. I gave it 4.5 stars, and this is part of the Duke Dynasty series, but I'm not sure which number. And I also do not think I read anything else in that series if there were previous titles in it. Okay, that's it. That's all 51 books. I know I spoke quickly, but I did give it enough time between each title that the book cover will pop up on the screen, so you'll at least be able to see a visual representation of what I read. And in the description box below, which I do have to make a couple of corrections in my notes, you will see the name of the book, the author, the rating, the date of release, and also the Amazon affiliate link for each title. And the link is there in case you're interested in the books themselves, but also to inform you that as an Amazon affiliate, I will make a very, very tiny commission should you to purchase any books via that link. And I think that's it. This video is a little longer than last month's, but last month's wrap up, I should say. But I'm glad I was able to tell you about all of these books, and I will start the process of working on my video for the July reads, because there's just a few days left this month, so it's time to get that video ready. Alright, thank you for your time, and I will be back with more videos. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.